This evening, we step back in time. We go back to the night when Jesus met his closest companions to celebrate the Passover. Only this Passover would bring a new meaning, one that would hold significant importance for the followers of Jesus for the rest of time. Throughout our Lenten journey thus far, we have met some of the extraordinary women who were a part of Jesus' ministry. We have come to know firsthand the importance these women held to Jesus. While the Bible does not mention these women being present at the Last Supper, many historians and biblical scholars believe they were present or in some way involved with the events surrounding Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. The Gospel and the New Testament books record women present at many of the significant events in Jesus' life and ministry. As we begin our journey, let us consider some of the women historians and scholars believe may have been present or involved that night at the Last Supper. According to gospel accounts and Christian tradition, Jesus' mother Mary was one of his most faithful followers. It is likely she attended the last Passover, a family Seder meal, with her son. Another Mary from Magdala was a disciple Jesus appeared to first after his resurrection. She was obviously in the vicinity of the events and likely to have been present as well. A third Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus of Bethany, could have attended the Last Supper, sitting and listening one last time at Jesus' feet. Someone had to cook the meal. Perhaps her sister Martha filled that role. Salome, another of the women mentioned in the Gospels, was probably the wife of Zebedee and, according to some sources, the sister of Jesus' mother. If so, she was Jesus' aunt and would most likely have attended this significant family meal. These women and many others were faithful followers of Jesus. They assisted him in caring for the needs of others, sharing the Father's love, and spreading the good news of hope and salvation found only in Jesus Christ. As we read in the Bible, Jesus had many followers. At the start of his earthly ministry, Jesus gathered together a group of 12 men to be his closest companions, his helpers, his followers, his disciples. These 12 men were simple, ordinary men, but Jesus saw something extraordinary in each one of them. Let us continue on our journey to see and experience the events of the Last Supper and to learn about these men whom Jesus called his disciples. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations there." So the disciples set out and went to the city and found everything as he had told them. And they made the preparations for the Passover meal there. When it was evening, he came with the 12, and they found their place and reclined at the table. Jesus knew the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. As the evening meal progressed, Jesus got up and took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Matthew was a tax collector at the gates of Jerusalem. It is said there is no class of men in the world more hated than tax collectors. However, this did not stop Jesus from approaching Matthew. When Jesus asked Matthew to follow him, it meant giving up all of his wealth, his prestige, everything. His life would never be the same again. Matthew gave Jesus a great feast in his home, along with many of the disciples and his fellow tax collector associates. From that day, Matthew repented and followed Jesus. The ancient scriptures became a way of life for him. Matthew first preached the good news in Judea to his own countrymen. It was said that never had there been a man more unsuited for the job than Matthew. But in the hands of the master, he became the first man to write down Jesus' teachings. Jesus took Matthew from a life of money and gave him riches of a far greater kind. Since James was a common name, he was often called James, son of Alphaeus, or James the Lesser. James was a witness to Jesus' baptism. John was baptizing people, and Jesus asked John to baptize him. Afterward, Jesus called James to be his disciple and follow him. James became a devoted disciple. Later in his life, James served as a leader in the church at Jerusalem and is sometimes referred to as the Bishop of Jerusalem. James was bold in declaring his faith to all Jerusalem from the temple ramparts and dedicated his life to showing that Jesus came to reconcile mankind. Andrew was a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee when he met John the Baptist. John's message inspired Andrew to follow him until the day Jesus appeared. Andrew knew immediately that Jesus was the Messiah and committed his life to following Jesus. Andrew was the first to bring someone to the Lord when he brought his brother Peter to Jesus. Both Andrew and his brother Peter left behind their family and fishing nets to follow Jesus and become fishers of men. Andrew was also with Jesus at the feeding of the 5,000. It was Andrew who brought the little boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish to Jesus. He had no idea Jesus would be able to turn this small lunch into a meal for thousands. It was miracles like this that compelled Andrew to dedicate his life to serve the Lord. He eventually died a martyr's death when he refused to offer a sacrifice to the pagan gods. He truly gave his life for the cause of Christ. Peter was a fisherman. He was brought to Jesus by his brother Andrew. With his commitment to discipleship, Jesus named him Cephas, which means rock or stone. Jesus immediately recognized Peter's headstrong and impulsive nature. While he knew this would often get Peter into trouble, Jesus also knew that these qualities would be instrumental in establishing the early church. Peter followed Jesus with passion and conviction. When the angry mob came to the Garden of Gethsemane to arrest Jesus, it was Peter who drew his sword and cut off one of the soldiers' ears. It was also Peter who vowed that he would never deny knowing Jesus, only to later deny him 3 times. Despite some of his sporadic and knee-jerk reactions, Peter did live up to Jesus' initial name for him, the Rock. In fact, before ascending into heaven, Jesus himself told Peter, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, Peter was a cornerstone of the early church and became one of the leaders of the church in Jerusalem. On the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit spoke through Peter and converted 3,000 souls to follow Christ.